Greetings, everyone. My name is Charles Kovach, the not safe for work presidential candidate campaigning for more direct democracy. And because simply saying I think we should have more direct democracy over and over and over again gets kind of dull, boring, and repetitive, I make videos talking about current events and other things that interest me as a way to garner attention to this campaign and this concept. And today, as you can tell, I am wearing my glasses, which means we are going to read another piece of legislation and see what we think. Or at least in this video, what I think, because this is kind of a one-way thing for now. So what I am reading today is H.R. 5185. The short title, this act may be cited as the Green New Deal for Public Housing Act. Let's get into it. Section 2, purposes. The purpose of this act is 1. To stimulate, gather, and develop the workforce capacity, tools, financing, and materials needed to rehabilitate, upgrade, and modernize and transition public housing. 2. To rehabilitate public housing that is severely distressed and causing residents to be exposed to unhealthy and unsafe environments. 3. To upgrade and equip all public housing with cutting-edge materials, infrastructure, and all electric appliances made in the United States in order to improve energy efficiency, water quality, and material living standards in public housing to support United States manufacturing. 4. To modernize public housing laws in order to maximize tenant participation and management by low and very low income individuals in the rehabilitation, upgrade, and transition of public housing through education, training, and jobs. And 5. To transition the entire public housing stock of the United States as swiftly and seamlessly as possible into highly efficient, energy-efficient homes that produce on-site or procure enough carbon-free renewable energy to meet total energy consumption annually. I like how this starts out because so many people, when they look at law, they look at the word of the law, the letter of the law, and not the intent, and there always winds up being a disparity between the two. Well, not always, but there often winds up being a disparity between the two. What is the intent of having this law, and what is the wording of what it says? Because sometimes they don't always actually agree in people's eyes. And this is something we need more of, in my opinion. Okay, definitions. In this act, Community Resilience Center. The term Community Resilience Center means a communal space in public housing that is used as a cooling center, heating center, or disaster relief center during extreme weather. 2. Eligible entity. The term eligible entity means Alpha, public housing agency. Bravo, an Indian tribe or tribally designated housing entity that is eligible to receive assistance under the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, which is 25 U.S.C. 4101 ex sequitur. And Charlie, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, as defined in Section 801 of the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, 42 U.S.C. 4221. Okay, 3. An Indian tribe, tribally designated housing entity. The terms Indian tribe and tribally designated housing entity have the meanings given to those terms in Section 4 of the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, which is 25 U.S.C. 4103. 4. Public housing. The term public housing, Alpha, has the meaning given, I just can't read today, so that's going to be a thing throughout this whole reading, apparently. Given to the term in Section 3, Bravo, the United States Housing Act of 1937, 42 U.S.C. 1437, Alpha Bravo. And Bravo includes 1. Any dwelling owned by an Indian tribe that is or was a dwelling unit in public housing. 2. Any low-income housing dwelling unit described in Section 302 Bravo 1 of the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, which is 25 U.S.C. 4152 Bravo 1. 3. Any dwelling unit assisted under Section 802 of the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, which is 25 U.S.C. 4222. And 4. Any dwelling unit that 1. Was a low-income housing dwelling unit described in Section 302 Bravo 1 of the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, 25 USC 4152 Bravo 1 and 2 is rented only to households with an income that is not more than 80% of the area median income. That is good. The fact that the legislation, or that the wording is based off of percentages and based off a percentage and a geocentric percentage rather than a flat rate, like you hear this fight for 15. And again, let me point out that $1 in New York doesn't get you the same thing that $1 in Alabama can. It's not that simple. This is why when we talk about minimum wage, my stance on minimum wage is a geocentric minimum wage based on percentages of cost of living in the area, based on where the place of work is. So this is probably my favorite part of the legislation so far. Okay, 5, public housing agency. The term public housing agency has the meaning given the term in Section 3 Bravo of the United States Housing Act of 1937, which is 42 USC 1437 Alpha Bravo. 6, public housing resident-owned business. The term public housing resident-owned business means a business concern that Alpha provides economic opportunities as defined in Section 3 Echo of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, which is 12 USC 1701 Uniform Echo, and Bravo is owned by public housing residents. 7, renewable energy. The term renewable energy means Alpha, utility, community, and small-scale photovoltaic and thermal solar energy. Bravo, utility and small-scale wind energy. Charlie, geothermal energy. Delta, microturbine hydroelectricity. Echo, energy efficiency. Foxtrot, building electrification. What do you mean by building electrification? It's kind of a general term. Gulf, energy storage. Hotel, microgrids. And India, modern distribution grid infrastructure. And going to energy storage, again, this is something I talked about before. Energy storage is a concern because if you use certain kinds of energy storage, it's not going to be beneficial. Batteries, with energy storage, typically have very specific uses. They are either fast discharge, slow discharge, or general use. And once again, I know I still haven't done any research to see if there are any better general use batteries, but lead acid batteries, as far as I know, are the best general use batteries. The only problem is that with lead acid batteries, you have electrolysis, which means the water gets converted into diatomic oxygen and hydrogen. So you have to constantly replace it with distilled water, potable water, drinkable water. See where the issue is coming in? And I'm pretty sure that any general use battery that you use instead is still either going to need water or just kick the can down the road for ecological disasters. Let's see. 8, secretary. The term secretary means the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. 9, zero carbon home. The term zero carbon home means a highly energy efficient home that produces on-site or procures enough carbon-free renewable energy to meet the total annual energy consumption of the home. Section 4, congressional findings and sense of Congress for improved architectural design in government housing programs. Section 4 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, which is 12 USC 1701 Victor, is amended to read as follows. So what I'm about to read is going to be shoved into the Housing and Urban Development Act. It will have a new section, Section 4, Improved Architectural Design in Government Housing Programs. Alpha, findings. Congress finds that 1. If federal aid is to make its full community-wide contribution toward improving our urban and rural environments, federal aid must have a greater impact on improvements in architectural design. And 2, even within the necessary budget limitations on housing for low and moderate income families, architectural design and environmental performance can be improved not only to make the housing more livable, but also to better suit the needs of occupants, including human and environmental health, zero carbon emissions, well-being, accessibility, and equity. Bravo, a sense of Congress. It is a sense of Congress that in the administration of housing programs that assist in the provision of housing for low and moderate income families, emphasis should be given to 1. Encouraging good architectural design that yields maximal environmental performance and adheres to accessibility guidelines established in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which is 42 U.S.C. 12101 et sequitur, and is an essential component of such housing as an essential component of such housing, and 2, developing with opportunities for resident involvement housing that will be of such quality as to reflect the highest international architectural standards and the architectural standards of the neighborhood and the community in which it is situated, consistent with prudent budgeting. Okay, so make homes that are stable, but not spending an ungodly amount on it. That seems practical. And this part where community where it's situated, that implies the public housing also, or the housing being built to withstand things like hurricanes and tornadoes, or and whatnot, earthquakes too. Okay, so that is going to be section. If this bill passes, it's going to be Section 4 of the Housing and Urban Development Act. Okay, now back to the original document. Well, sounds like somebody left a package in front of my door, which means I have to kick the door open so I can get the package, and because that's how packages should be delivered. Okay, and there goes the UPS truck. Section 5, Declaration of Policy. We're back on the original document. Section 2 Alpha of the United States Housing Act of 1937, which is 42 U.S.C. 1437 Alpha, is amended to read as follows. So this is all what's going to be put into the Act. Alpha, Declaration of Policy. It is a policy of the United States, 1. To modernize the intersections of federal and local government by employing the funds and credit of the United States as provided in this Act. Alpha, to guarantee the right to housing for every individual. Bravo, to assist states and political subdivisions of the states in ensuring that 1. All housing in the United States is habitable, highly energy efficient, and safe, and 2. Housing conditions lead to good health, security, and adequate protection from the economic spheres relating to old age, disability, sickness, accident, unemployment, and Charlie, which the last two are under assisting the subdivisions. So Charlie, to protect, maintain, and preserve, and expand public housing as a sustainable safety net for all people. Okay. So for the most part, it seems okay on its face, which is give people adequate homes. Okay. Well, really, I can't really complain much because it talks about having public housing as a safety net, not as a standard measure. So, yeah, so far it seems pretty good. Especially the part where it talks about protection from, shit happening, basically. I mean, isn't that why we have things like government in the first place? Is because, okay, the reason why we have government, I mean, in certain ways, you got to think of government as being an insurance policy. This might happen. You're investing in this might happen. Somebody might declare war on us. Somebody might rob my house. Somebody might throw a Molotov cocktail on my house. In which case, I need the police and the fire department. It might be an accident. These are reasons why we have government. Let's see. Okay, continuing with the amendment. 2, that is the responsibility of the federal government in conjunction with public housing agencies to incentivize, promote, and protect the independent, collaborative, and collective actions of public housing residents and other private citizens to develop housing in a manner that strengthens entire neighborhoods, and 3. That the federal government should act and build new public housing where there is a serious need that the free market cannot address or is not addressing responsibly. Okay, so it's not saying that they're preventing any people from buying homes. It's basically saying where all the homes being built just don't help the people that they're just no good to the people that actually need homes. Okay, so that's the end of that amendment. Now back to the original document, Section 6, Green New Deal Public Housing Grants. Hold on 1 second. Alrighty. Just need to take care of something. Okay. Green New Deal Public Housing Grants. Alpha, establish of grant programs. I have to sneeze. This sucks. Ugh. 1. Grants for community workforce development. Alpha, in general, the Secretary shall establish a grant program that provides amounts to eligible entities to facilitate workforce development projects and high-income employment transition at public housing. Okay? So, help people get educated. Bravo, preference. In awarding grants under this paragraph, the Secretary shall give preference to applicants submitted by 1. Eligible entities located in rural areas. 2. Eligible entities described in subparagraph Bravo or Charlie of Section 3, 2, and 3. Eligible entities that demonstrate a capacity to facilitate a workforce development program that includes 1. The development of career-related skills, including financial and economic empowerment education. 2. Direct entry into apprenticeship programs. 3. Certification or associate degree acquisition. 4. Technical assistance and resources for public housing resident-owned businesses for purposes of compliance with the requirements under Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, which is 12 U.S.C. 1701 uniform, including Alpha, legal or compliance services on behalf of public housing resident-owned businesses for the purpose of helping them access and apply for government procurement and contracting opportunities. Bravo, education on starting and sustaining a business. Charlie, assessing insurance and bonds. And Delta, demonstrating capacity and sustainable operations. Okay, so I got something to say about this, but I want to read some more. Okay, so 5. Training and development of skills necessary for career development in the fields, trades, and services reasonably determined by during the first public comment period held in accordance with subsection Bravo 3 to be of interest to public housing residents. 6. Educational and organizational tools for public housing residents in order to advance the models of worker cooperatives and collective bargaining. That part right there is extremely good. 7. Education, engagement, employment, and empowerment resources to help both residents of public housing and local low and very low income individuals avail themselves of opportunities made available under the Workforce Development Program, including education, engagement, and empowerment resources provided in partnership with Alpha, a local entity that operates a family self-sufficiency program under Section 23 of the United States Housing Act of 1937, which is 42 U.S.C. 1437 uniform, and Bravo, community-based organizations that demonstrate a commitment to and history of organizing with public housing residents. 8. Innovative design partnerships with local schools and architectural firms. 9. Training and employment opportunities reserved specifically for local low and very low income people that were formerly incarcerated. And 10. Stipends valued at not less than $250 per week to individuals participating in the workforce development program. Wow, this is very much like what I've been talking about. The majority of this section right here, as I've said before, college should not be, higher education, well, really, education in general is not something that the individual should have to pay for. Education is a general investment of society into its future generations so that the next generation can carry on the labors and develop new labors in order to sustain the society and to keep the economy going. Education is, this whole idea of education being about you getting ahead in life has always been a load of horseshit. Education is about you being a part of society, you being a cog. Yes, you being yourself at the same time, but at the same, it's a duality. You being yourself and who you are, but at the same time being a part of something greater. That is the community in which you live in, the country that is your community, and so forth. And this is because of this is why I've said that not only should we cancel student debt, we should also make education not only free, but for anybody who is going for education beyond a high school degree, beyond the bare minimum, they should receive a stipend so that they can live. This legislation, this section of this legislation is basically saying the same thing. If you have nothing, we will give you a home and a chance to be educated so that you can become, once again, a part of the economy. I've said before that I reject the notion of person not wanting to be a burger flipper for the rest of their life because reasons. However, when that legitimate is reasons because technology does advance and things do change, just ask all the switchboard operating women of the early 1900s. You have to adapt. When you don't have to adapt, you don't have to adapt, and that's fine. Some people, I never wanted to do anything other than just go into a factory and work in a factory for the rest of my life. But I had to adapt. And so I took whatever opportunities I could in order to still survive. But those opportunities came at a great cost. One of which is me being permanently disabled. Why should people have to prevent themselves, do things that have a chance of preventing themselves from being able to work in order to just be able to work? So once again, this is why I wanted to make not only education free, but give a stipend to anybody that decides to go for education. This does a similar thing. It basically does the same thing, just in a different form. Instead of people getting a stipend, it's first off you have to be in a low-income home, and second off, you are going to get a stipend, but it's just going to be a very small stipend. Now, the question here with this legislation becomes, okay, is it only low income and very low income? What about no income? What about people that are completely jobless and unemployed, and the unemployment has run out and they can't get welfare for whatever reason, or if somebody is unable to work and they want to be educated because they still want to work, which is things that I have tried to do myself, and really what I'm doing right now in this vying for the presidency, does that still factor in? I mean, this is just a question I have on this legislation, because I mean, for the most part, I agree with it. The only hardship, the only point of, okay, is this the best thing? Is, okay, do you have to be low income before? Well, here's the thing. When I say that I wanted people to receive a stipend for getting educated, it would be I never said it explicitly, but I would hope it had been implied that it would be under the condition that that's all they're doing, is that they're being educated, because there are no jobs, or the jobs are going away because of automation and other things. So that's, in comparison to that, I have questions about this section right here, but for the most part, it is pretty good, and I agree with it. Not just because of my own personal biases, but because of the practicality of the situation and what we have to deal with. Okay. So now that that's all over, let's go back to. Okay, so that's finished up the the preference section of the grants. Okay, Charlie, compliance managers. Not more than 10% of the amount of a grant received by an eligible entity under this paragraph may be used by an eligible entity to hire or otherwise retain reporting and compliance managers with sufficient expertise to ensure that the eligible entity can comply with the requirements of Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, 12 U.S.C. 1701 uniform. Okay. So 2. Grants for deep energy retrofits. The Secretary shall establish a grant program that provides amounts to eligible entities to conduct physical needs assessments and subsequent deep energy retrofits in public housing, including alpha retrofits for 1. Energy efficient windows. Would be nice. I know the insulation of my windows suck. 2. Super insulation of roofs and exterior walls, including the addition of new cladding and buildings and the rerouting of plumbing and electricity. Okay. 3. Electrification of water heating, building systems, and using electric heat pumps. And 4. Electric heat pumps to provide air conditioning where feasible. Okay, so when I was questioning the electrification before, I guess they're talking about going away from like natural gas heat and that kind of stuff, which is, I don't know, I'd have to look at the joules per watt conversion overall, or I'm sorry, joules per watt. So the kilograms to joule conversion. So how many kilograms does it take to produce 1 joule through natural gas, and how many kilograms does it take to produce 1 joule through electrical energy? Because when you're talking about electrical energy, right, like using electricity, and I know that this legislation talks about having things like solar panel and wind turbines and whatnot nearby or on the buildings themselves. This still brings the concern of having to bring in electrical energy from somewhere else. And the longer distance you transfer electrical energy, the greater power losses you have. It's called I2R losses. So that's why transmission lines are such high voltage, because if you kick the voltage up really high, then the current drops and then you reduce your heat losses. So that's what I'm saying is looking at the overall kilograms per joule, or joules per kilogram in this case, conversion between the natural resource and the final energy produced. Okay, where did I leave off? Okay, so Bravo. So this is still what kind of retrofits are going to be included. Bravo, strategies to increase air tightness of building envelope, including air sealant paints. And Charlie, acquisition and installation of heat recovery ventilation systems. Okay. Yeah. That part gets kind of difficult, but you know, I could see it'd be a good idea to try and implement something. 3. Grants for energy efficiency, building electrification upgrades, and water quality. Alpha, in general, the Secretary shall establish a grant program that provides amounts to eligible entities for upgrades, replacements, and improvements in public housing to energy efficiency, building electrification, including for 1. Conducting physical needs and assessment of public housing dwelling units. 2. In-unit energy efficient product upgrades, including upgrading to 1. Modern energy efficient insulation. Please no asbestos. 2. All electric state-of-the-art efficient appliances. 3. Energy efficient bathroom plumbing, including low-flow toilets. I don't know, man. Sometimes the low-flow toilet just doesn't do the job. 4. Energy efficient laundry machines. 5. Energy efficient air filters. 6. One thing I do is my air filters is I don't really buy new air filters. I just get compressed air and spray my air filters clean, and I just reuse them. 6. Energy monitoring devices, including smart meters and smart thermostats. 7. Energy efficient light bulbs. Okay, I may have talked about this before, but when it comes to lighting in general, things like this, they don't account for the psychological effects of lighting. There is a cause and effect relationship between what types of light bulbs you use and your mood. Incandescent light bulbs, even though they consume more power, are better for a person's mood because they are a more natural light. They are closer related to the sun. When you use things like fluorescent light bulbs of any sort, well, then that becomes problematic because the brain, even though you don't consciously pick up on things, your subconscious will pick up on things. And your subconscious can pick up on frequencies around it through not only light, but also electrostatic and electromagnetic fields. So the brain, alright, I'm just going to go into this little conversation now. The human brain operates at different frequencies depending on how awake you are. If you're asleep, the frequency is somewhere like, 4 to 8. But when you're awake, it's roughly, it's in the mid-20s, like 22 to 26, somewhere around there. But frequencies that your brain can detect, not that your brain can detect, but that are strong enough to influence certain aspects of your brain, will insert that extra frequency into your brain. So this is why I always tell people, like, don't sleep with your cell phone next to you, or things like that, because that high frequency being close to you is an epicenter of something that's interfering with your brain chemistry. If you have things further away from you, it's okay. It's basically a calculation based on how strong the signal is to how close it is to you. But things like LEDs, things like fluorescent lights, which operate at 60 hertz, 60 hertz here in the United States. When you have the human brain being exposed to higher frequencies, then you become more agitated and anxious, and it can help foster depression too. So this is another reason why 5G is so dangerous, because not only of the mental effects that it can have, but also there's some physical effects that just having a pulsating magnetic field or electrostatic field can cause. It can cause things like cancer, because that's why I also tell people, don't keep your cell phone in your pocket, pressed next to your body, because that can cause electrons to shift when they don't need to be shifted, and cause some chromosomes to be dropped or inserted into your DNA whenever cells are going to replicate, and boom, now all of a sudden you got cancer. And it's not a guaranteed thing. I mean, none of this stuff is guaranteed. It's all based on percentages, chances, statistics. So when it comes to something like lighting, and then LED lights, okay, they seem okay, except for I'm not sure we have LEDs that are natural white light. I think it's all still based on the blue LED. But even still, LEDs lack that heating element, that radiating heat that the sun provides. So it's not, I mean, if you just as an experiment, look at an incandescent light bulb, look at a fluorescent light bulb, and look at an LED bulb, and just think just sit there and ponder, how does each one make you feel just looking at it? How does one differ from the other in how you feel about it? Which one makes you feel more comfortable? Now, for some, it may be, we could argue that those of us that are older and used to incandescent bulbs would feel more comfortable with incandescent bulbs because we're older and that's what we grew up on, but that ain't it. That would actually play a very small part. It has to do with how the light is created and how the energy is radiated. So that's my problem with going to energy efficient light bulbs. is that, yeah, sure, it sounds nice, but if we're all completely fucking miserable and hating our lives and everything aspect of it, fuck the energy efficient light bulbs. Okay, highly insulated windows, which is 8. 9, reflective roofing. Well, reflective roofing. So realistically, when it comes to roofing, you could switch. You could not just have reflective roofing, but you can possibly make it a way to alternate between reflective roofing and absorbative. Shut up. Words are hard. I failed English. So possibly alternating between two types of roofing between the summer and the winter, so that during the winter time you have roofing that actually absorbs heat, and during the summer you have roofing that actually reflects heat. So 10, smart supervisory control and data acquisitions and building the grid integration. No. I've said this before. No. Okay. This part right here, and the same thing with the other Green New Deal with the smart energy grids. No. Okay? Anything can be hacked. Period fucking finish. How hard is this to understand? Not only that, you know, we already have problems with companies that decide, oh, we're going to, we need to cut off some people, otherwise the entire grid is going to go down. Let's cut off the poorest people and maybe the black people also. How the fuck is this any different? It's the same thing. Oh, we need to save on the grid, so we're just going to cut off random people's air conditioning, and hopefully our system's up to date on who actually is going to live and die. I mean, look, I can understand that there's arguments for it, but ultimately the negatives far outweigh the positives, because you're making too much of a precarious situation by putting the control of a home's intricacies in a generalized control center. No. Okay. So that was the upgrades. By the way, I had a chance to upgrade my thermostat to one that would what's it called? That the power company could shut off if they needed to save power, and I didn't, because I have my own concerns that if I'm going to lose power, you know, everybody's going to lose power. You know, it's one thing with everybody losing power, because that's going to happen, but as an individual, I have certain concerns. So, yeah. Okay, so 3, infrastructure related to building electrification, including the upgrade of 1, electric heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, and including cold climate heat pumps. Okay, and once again, what I talked about before, about the joules per kilogram. 2, electrical panels. 3, electrical appliances to replace appliances reliant on fossil fuels such as gas stoves and hot water heaters. Okay, again, joules per kilogram. 4, water quality upgrades, including the replacement of water pipes in public housing if a quality test of drinking water concentrations in public households and public housing exceeds 3.1 parts per billion of lead. 2, 20 parts per trillion combined of the fine perfluoroalkyl and perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which are alpha perfluorooctanoic perfluorooctanoic acid, okay, perfluorooctane sulfonate, perfluorohexane sulfonic acid, perfluoroheptanoic acid, perfluorononanoic acid. I have a very, very, very vague idea of what those could be. I'll have to look those up. 3, 0.01 milligrams per liter of arsenic. 4. 1.3 milligrams per liter of copper. 5. Drinking water standards of the Environmental Protection Agency for organic and inorganic contaminants, radionuclides, and microbiological contaminants. And 6. Did I say 4 before? That was 5. 6. Any other Environmental Protection Agency standard adopted under the Safe Drinking Water Act, 42 USC 300 Foxtrot Exequatur. Benchmarking. Bravo. So that was all under Alpha, which is the general part of the upgrades. So Bravo, benchmarking energy and water consumption. In addition to the requirements described in subsection Bravo, an eligible excuse me. Just needed to project a lung there. An eligible entity desiring a grant under this paragraph shall include in the grant application a commitment to benchmarking energy and water consumption using Energy Star Portfolio Manager or another system approved by the Department of Housing and Urban Development for a period of not less than 5 years beginning on the date in which the eligible entity receives the grant. So things like Energy Star and Underwriters Laboratories and all that stuff, they are things that I question anymore, given just how completely fucking corrupt everything is. 4. Grants for community energy generation. Alpha. In general, the Secretary shall establish a grant program that provides amounts to eligible entities to build and expand community energy generation and public housing, including the construction of and ongoing costs associated with 1. Renewable energy rooftops. 2. Renewable energy generation. 3. Photovoltaic glass windows. That seems interesting. 4. The bulk purchase of clean energy grid supply from energy utilities. And 5. Community scale energy storage systems. Bravo. Priority. In awarding grants under this paragraph, the Secretary shall give preference to applications submitted by eligible entities that 1. Demonstrate an ability to generate the greatest amount of renewable energy that can be consumed by public housing projects and transferred to the local energy grid. And 2. Demonstrate a commitment to provide job training and contracting opportunities to public housing residents and public housing resident-owned businesses. Okay, so if you can make clean energy, you got priority. If you can give people jobs that need it, you get priority. Charlie, profits. 1. In general, with respect to energy, with any energy produced by an eligible entity carrying out a grant under this paragraph, the eligible entity may retain 90% of any profits earned from selling the energy. Okay. So there's like a whole bunch of questions I could throw in here, but this video is taking a long time already. It's already 43 minutes. In fact, probably you've all checked out by now. 2. Vote. An eligible entity described in Clause 1 with not less than 50%, not less than 50 public housing dwelling units shall provide residents of public housing the opportunity to vote on how the profits earned under Clause 1 shall be used. 3. Other revenue. Any profits not retained under this subparagraph shall be transferred to the Department of Treasury for deposit in a general fund. 5. Grants for recycling and zero waste programs. The Secretary shall establish a grant program that provides amounts to eligible entities to establish or expand recycling and zero waste programs in public housing, including the recycling of appliances and machines that were replaced through the grant program described in paragraph 3, which is the grant programs. 6. Grants for community resiliency and sustainability. God, I need water right now. The Secretary shall establish a grant program that provides amounts of eligible entities for community resilience and sustainability projects in public housing, including Alpha, the purchase and installation of energy storage, including batteries, flywheels, compressed air, and pumped hydroelectric or thermal energy storage in order to ensure energy backup of not less than 48 hours in the event of emergency or disaster. Flywheels, just so you know, it's basically so think of it like a battery, but instead of storing the energy into a chemical, storing the energy as in chemical form, you're changing the energy to kinetic energy. So you make this big wheel turn, and then when the power goes out, well, the momentum is keeping the wheel turning, and it has to dissipate that energy somehow. So it dissipates the energy by providing power to the circuit. It's I'm pretty sure a similar thing. Yeah, it's similar to how I believe the Prius works. So when the internal combustion part is being used, you have the flywheel turning, providing energy to the batteries. Well, it's not really similar, but it's kind of similar in that you're serving a dual use. So using a flywheel to store energy and using it to convert energy into, well, actually, in the Prius it's just conversion. Well, just shut up. So you're using the flywheel to store energy. It's pretty cool. That's what I'm getting at. Okay, Bravo. The construction of child care centers and ongoing costs associated with child care centers. Charlie, the construction of senior centers and ongoing costs associated with senior centers. Delta, the construction of community gardens and ongoing costs associated with community gardens. Echo, the maintenance of entire public housing developments. Foxtrot, the installation of publicly owned high-speed internet in order to provide universal internet access for all residents with an upload speed of not less than 100 megabits per second and a download speed of not less than 100 megabits per second, and the ongoing costs associated with providing that internet infrastructure and access. Golf, the establishment or improvement and painting of community centers and other shared community spaces, the personnel of which shall earn the hire of 1. The local prevailing wage, or 2. A wage of $15 per hour. Hotel, the establishment or improvement of dedicated infrastructure for transportation by bicycle, including lanes, parking spots, bulk purchase of enough bicycles to offer 1 bicycle to every low and very low income public housing resident. This has problems as much as I like it. We've seen many problems with this and things in places like Los Angeles and even like China and whatnot, where bikes just kind of pile up in places. Unless they're talking about people owning bikes, in which case it's a little bit better. But the things like this even provide, raise questions on for and against such a thing happening. But again, I'm taking too long, so I'll talk about that later. India, the establishment and leasing of commercial activity that offers public housing residents on-site access to goods and services, including good quality healthcare clinics and dental clinics, bookstores, learning and tutoring centers, and affordable organic groceries. And Juliet repairs upgrades to public housing to ensure compliance with the physical condition standards under 5.703 of Title 24 Code of Federal Regulations. Okay, so that was all what the communities, what the grants are for the communities for their sustainability. Where the hell did I leave? Well, okay, 7, grants for climate adaptation and emergency disaster response. The Secretary shall establish a program that provides amounts in technical assistance to eligible entities for construction and ongoing costs associated with climate adaptation and emergency disaster response for public housing, including Alpha, integrated solutions that combine better walls, heating, cooling, ventilation, solar, and storage into easy-to-install affordable retrofit, and into a single easy-to-install and affordable retrofit for public housing. So, when we talk about walls, so here's another. I know I got time. Okay, but here's another point of contestation. That's a word. I'm going with that's a word. But anyways, so when you talk about walls, you bring in the question of like shared heat versus shared noise. Personally, I think shared heat is not worth the shared noise, particularly because, again, people are individuals and so forth. So, like where I live, some of the walls are not well insulated. Like, I get heat from my neighbors, from some neighbors, but from other neighbors, there's cinder block between us, so I get neither heat nor sound. This is one thing that ultimately affects people negatively, is when you live in an apartment complex and you can hear your neighbors. It's that whole thing of like idiots who thought, this idiotic wave of, oh, shared workspaces are so great because everybody can collaborate and so forth. No, motherfucker, I can't concentrate on my goddamn work because I gotta listen to every other bullshit thing that's going on in my fucking office. So, yeah. Walls should mitigate sound, and walls should be well insulated to mitigate sound and heat transfer, so that people can be more individualized. Okay, Bravo. Additional solar and storage on site or through local community microgrid in order to allow residents to access essential energy during power outages. Charlie, insulating and eliminating air leakage in order to ensure that individual dwellings can retain a safe temperature during the power outage until power is restored or emergency assistance arrives. And Delta, installing rigid foam wall insulation in hurricane and earthquake-prone areas in order to create shear walls to resist structural damage from walls tilting or falling during high winds and earthquakes. Okay, so that's part of what I was talking before. Okay, so that was all under subsection alpha, which was, I'm scrolling up to it, the establishment of the grant programs. And now we are subsection Bravo, which is the grant application. So 1, the common application form. The Secretary shall develop a single common grant application that an eligible entity shall use to apply for one or more grants under subsection alpha. 2, required contents. As a condition of receiving a grant under subsection alpha, each eligible entity shall include in the grant application submitted to the Secretary alpha a certification that in carrying out activities under the grant, 1, the eligible entity shall 1, ensure that the materials used by all contractors and subcontractors receiving the grant funds are substantially manufactured, mined, produced in the United States in accordance with Chapter 83 of Title 41 United States Code, commonly known as the Buy American Act. 2, ensure that all laborers and mechanics employed by contractors or subcontractors in the performance of construction, alteration, or repair work, financed in whole or in part with assistance under this section, shall be paid wages at a rate not less than those prevailing on similar construction in the locality as determined by the Secretary of Labor. Alpha, in accordance with subchapter 4 of Chapter 31 of Title 40 United States Code, commonly known as the Davis-Bacon Act. Bacon. Bravo, who in carrying out this subclause shall have authority and functions set forth in Reorganization Plan number 14 of 1950, which is 64 Stat 1267 5 USC, whatever that stands for, and Section 3145 of Title 40 United States Code. So there's a whole lot of references to other codes for you, but basically it's just saying that these are all the regulations that the people got to meet, and who can work on it and so forth. Okay, so now, and that was all under subclause 2 of the eligible entities having to do. So subclause 3 of eligible entities shall, so subclause 3, be a party to a project labor agreement or require contractors and subcontractors receiving grants funds to consent to a project labor agreement. 4, require all project labor agreements to be in compliance with the hiring and contracting requirements described in subsections Charlie and Delta of Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, which is 12 U.S.C. 1701 uniform. And 5, prohibit all contractors and subcontractors receiving grant funds from hiring employees through a temporary staffing agency unless the relevant state workforce agency certifies that temporary employees are necessary to address an acute short-term labor demand. So that's kind of important, is don't try to undercut people who are actually like there on a job. You can't just say, oh yeah, I got all these people, they're all experienced and I pay them well, but I'm going to hire some temporary people that I can pay dirt in order to do this. 7, for each skilled craft employed to rehabilitate, upgrade, innovate, and transition public housing developments, demonstrate an ability to use and commit to use individuals enrolled in registered apprenticeship program who shall, to the greatest extent practicable, constitute not less than 20% of individuals working on the project. So make sure that people that are trying to learn and become like the next generation of tradesmen are learning. You know, at least some of them are. You know, like in pretty pretty much every state, but at least in New Jersey, you have to be, in order to be a journeyman electrician, you have to do apprenticeship for 2,000 hours, which is roughly 4 years, or well, depending on how much overtime you get. 8, to the greatest extent practicable, ensure that contractors and subcontractors provide preferential treatment in hiring laborers and mechanics that are alpha, public housing residents. Yeah. Bravo, hired from within 50 miles of their official residence. Yeah. Charlie, veterans or active or retired military. I don't know how well the active part's going to work. I mean, if you're active military, I mean, when you're active military, you don't, unless you're at some rate that doesn't really require a whole lot of technical skill to begin with, you're probably not going to have enough free time to work a second job. And if you are working a second job, it's very precarious at best, because being in the military demands a lot of your time. I mean, pretty much the majority of my time in the military, my days were at least 12 hours. Let's see. So Delta, highly skilled union workers, or Echo, returning citizens who were formerly incarcerated individuals. Excellent. You see, well, I'll have the whole rehabilitative versus punitive thing, incarceration and whatnot. I've had it a little bit, but I know I'm going to have to go into it more at some point. Okay, so that was all under Section 1 of the eligible entity shall. Now Section 2, the eligible entity and all contractors and subcontractors of the eligible entity receiving grant funds, 1, shall not require mandatory arbitration for any dispute involving a worker engaged in service for the eligible entity, contractor, or subcontractor. So no, you can't hire people who sign, even if people signed away their rights to a trial, you can't enforce that. I think that's fucking brilliant. And 2, shall consider an individual performing any service under the grant as an employee, not an independent contractor of the eligible entity, contractor, of subcontractor, respectively, unless alpha, the individual is free from control and direction in connection with the performance of the service, both under the contract and for under the performance and for the both under the contract for the performance of the service, and in fact, bravo, the service is performed outside the usual course of business of the eligible entity, contractor, or subcontractor, respectively, and Charlie, the individual is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, profession, business, or same nature as that involved in such service. So basically, you have to consider all of the people working equally unless there's some special circumstance. That's what that whole thing was. Okay. So that was all under alpha certification. So bravo, a signed acknowledgement indicating a commitment to transition all public housing owned or managed by the eligible entity into zero carbon homes not later than 10 years after the date in which the eligible entity receives the grant. Charlie, a full accounting of the amount of funds required to complete the activities under the grant, and which shall 1. Be complete and reasonably calculated to accomplish the purposes of this act. 2. Include costs related to complying with local wage and labor laws. 3. Include the amount of funds expended by the eligible entity to comply with the resident and community engagement requirements under paragraph 3. And 4. Be updated and submitted to Congress on a quarterly basis. And paragraph 3 we haven't read yet. Let's see, and okay, so and Delta, a community impact assessment analysis of 1, the likely direct and indirect impact the grant funds, if awarded, will have on the economic empowerment and social mobility of traditional disadvantaged individuals and communities, and 2, whether the proposed actions to be taken under the grant would be affirmatively furthering and fair housing as defined in Section 5.152 of Title 24, Code of Federal Regulations, or any successor regulation. So the part thrown in here about traditionally disadvantaged individuals and communities is, again, I don't like the fact that I don't that I don't like the fact that I have to not like that, because, you know, that's again another conversation for another time. Okay, so paragraph 3 is the resident and community engagement before submitting application. Before submitting application for a grant under this subsection, an eligible entity shall A. Alpha. Solicit and consider community and public feedback to the maximum extent possible by providing for opportunities to comment via cloud-based content collaboration provider that is certified by the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program through 1. Initial public comment period for which the eligible entity shall sub 1 publish Alpha, description of each of the grant programs established under subsection Alpha, which was all the grants from before. Bravo, a form to be used to submit comments, and under the public comment period, 2. Give interested persons 90 days to Alpha, submit draft text directly into the application. Okay, that's good. Submit written data and accounting estimates. And Charlie, submit general comments. And then back under Alpha, number 2, a second public comment period beginning not later than 30 days after the end of the initial public comment period under Clause 1, for which the eligible entity shall 1. Publish a draft version of the completed comment application form described in subsection Alpha that contains at minimum Alpha, short analysis and evaluation of the relevant significant proposals set forth during the initial public comment period. And Bravo, a clear, fingers are hard, a clear and concise statement of the basis, purpose, and goals of the application. And 2, give interested persons 30 days to submit feedback on and recommend improvements to the draft final grant application. So, this is all. Have a public comment period for 90 days, let people submit ideas and so forth. Then go back and then within 30 days, look at everything, maybe make adjustments, and then put it up for another 30 days to comment on all the changes and everything. Okay, so Bravo. Host not less than 2 public hearings, which shall be recorded and held at convenient location for public housing residents for each public comment period described in subparagraph Alpha, to provide public housing residents with an opportunity to comment, with not less than 1 occurring in the afternoon and not less than 1 occurring in the evening. Okay, so trying to not prevent people from getting screwed by having to work. Charlie, solicit input and acquire signed approval of completed comment application form from the resident council or resident councils, if existing and active, of the public housing that will receive assistance under the grant. Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, so paragraph 4 now is priority for workforce development grants. The Secretary shall prioritize the review and funding of applications submitted for grants under subsection Alpha 1 over applications submitted for any other grants described in subsection Alpha. So subsection Alpha 1, I gotta scroll back there, blah blah blah, which is oh god, I hope I don't lose my place. So the grants for community workforce development, those grants take precedent over other grants. Okay, paragraph 5, exceptions for indigenous groups and tribes. Alpha, in general, any eligible entity described in section 3, 2, Bravo, that submits an application for a grant program described in this subsection 1 is exempt from compliance with subclauses 1, 2, and 3 of paragraph 2 Alpha 1 and paragraph 2 Alpha 1 subclause 1. I'm not going back to look at those. 2, is empowered to self-determine guidelines and standards pertaining to ensuring high road labor standards, supporting United States manufacturing, and ensuring community and resident engagement. Bravo, submission by tribally designed housing entities. An application for a grant under subsection Alpha for an Indian tribe may be prepared and submitted on behalf of the Indian tribe by the tribally designated housing entity for the Indian tribe. If the application contains a certification by the recognized tribal government of the grant beneficiary to the Indian tribe, that the Indian tribe, 1, has had an opportunity to review the application and has authorized the submission of the application by the tribally designated housing entity, or 2, has delegated to the tribally designated housing entity the authority to submit an application on behalf of the Indian tribe without prior review by the Indian tribe. Okay, so either they can submit it themselves or designate somebody to submit it. Okay, so subsection Charlie, selection of grant recipients. About 2/3 of the way, about 2/3, 3/4, somewhere between through the document. 1. In general, if any eligible entity submits to the Secretary an application for a grant under subsection Alpha that complies with the requirements and under subsection complies with the requirements under subsection Bravo, the Secretary shall award funds to the eligible entity that are required to complete the grant as specified in the accounting submitted under subsection Bravo to Charlie. Reapplication. If the Secretary determines that an application submitted by an eligible entity under this section does not comply with the requirements under subsection Bravo, Alpha, the Secretary shall provide to the eligible entity a summary of the requirements that the eligible entity has failed to meet, and Bravo, the eligible entity may reapply for the grant. So you can't just apply for a grant and be turned down and you're done. No, they have to tell you exactly what you did wrong, and then you can resubmit it. 3. An expedited review. Secretary shall expedite review of the application submitted by eligible entities that own or manage public housing in a congressional district, Alpha, with an aggregate total of not less than 5,000 public housing residents, Bravo, in which 1. Not less than 40% of the residents are not less than 62 years old, 2. Not less than 25% of the residents are disabled, or 3. Not less than 5% of all heads of household are not more than 24 years old, or Charlie, with an average household income of less than $40,000. Okay, that's problematic. I've already talked before about using hard numbers. Okay, subsection Delta, use of grant amounts for capacity building. An eligible entity may not use more than 5% of grant funds received under this section for activities to expand the capacity of the eligible entities to carry out the grant activities, including 1. Hiring staff, 2. Training residents for staff positions, 3. Providing technical assistance, 4. Community engagement, and 5. Other necessary administrative service activities. Subsection Echo, resident protection. Each eligible entity that is the recipient of a grant under subsection Alpha shall 1. Comply with the requirements under Part 24 of Title 49 Code of Federal Regulations and provide relocation assistance for any and all residents of public housing managed by the eligible entity who may be displaced during construction, and ensure that all temporary displaced residents can return to their homes once retrofitting is complete. So if you're going to upgrade somebody's home, you got to provide them with a place to live in the meantime. 2. Provide enhanced tenant protection vouchers under Section 8 Tango of the United States Housing Act of 1937, 42 U.S.C. 1437 Foxtrot Tango, to all displaced residents during the period in which dwelling units are under construction. That's 3. Ensure all activities undertaken as part of the grant do not result in reduction of total public housing dwelling units. So you can't say, oh yeah, we're going to retrofit some homes. Oh, we knocked some down. I guess we don't need them anywhere. Ha ha ha, bye. Okay. Subsection Foxtrot, consulting with agencies. The Secretary shall 1. Consult with the Secretary of Energy. Alpha, in developing criteria and assessing applications for grants described in paragraphs 1 through 5 and paragraph 7 of subsection Alpha, which is the who gets grants. And Bravo, to identify and verify state-of-the-art building materials and appliances made in the United States that can be produced at scale for purposes of this act. Okay, 2. The Secretary shall 2. Consult with the Secretary of Treasury to track alternative energy revenues that are returned to the Department of Treasury under subsection Alpha for Charlie. Okay, 3. Consult with the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency Alpha in developing criteria and assessing applications for grants described in paragraphs 2 through 5 and 7 of subsection Alpha. And Bravo, regarding testing air quality and water quality for purposes of grants described in subsection Alpha 3. 4. Consult with the, so again, this is all stuff that the Secretary shall do. 4. Consult with the Secretary of Education in developing criteria and assessing applications for grants under subsection Alpha 1. 5. Consult with the Secretary of Labor in developing criteria and assessing applications for grants under subsection Alpha 1. 6. Consult with the Administrator of Small Business Administration in developing criteria In assessing applications for grants described in paragraphs 1 through 6 of subsection Alpha. 7. Consult with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Alpha, in developing criteria and assessing application for grants described in subsection Alpha 6. And Bravo, regarding health trends related to all illnesses that disproportionately impact low-income people. Okay. 8. Consult with the administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency in developing criteria and assessing applications for grants under Alpha 7, subsection Alpha 7. 9. Consult with the Secretary of the Interior to develop criteria and assess applications for grants under subsection Alpha 6. And 10. Consult with any entity described in paragraphs 1 through 9 for any other purpose as determined necessary by the Secretary to carry out this section and the purposes of this Act. Subsection Golf reports. The Secretary shall submit to Congress biannual reports on the impact that the grant programs established under subsection Alpha have had on 1. The rehabilitation, upgrades, innovation, and transition of public housing in the United States. 2. Total greenhouse gas emission output and quarterly data on greenhouse gas emission reductions from individual public housing developments, specifically as they relate to Alpha, home energy carbon pollution emissions in each public housing development as calculated using the carbon footprint calculator from the Environmental Protection Agency. Bravo, waste-related carbon emissions in each public housing development as calculated using the carbon footprint calculator from the Environmental Protection Agency. And Charlie, total greenhouse gas emissions released by individual public housing buildings and homes within public housing developments as calculated by the Greenhouse Gas Equivalencies Calculator from the Environmental Protection Agency. Okay. 3. The amount of federal money saved due to energy cost savings at public housing projects on a quarterly basis. 4. The amount of energy savings per kilowatt hour at each public housing project on a quarterly basis. Kilowatt hours, joule. Well, yeah. 5. Public housing residents, including Alpha. Okay. Public housing residents, including Alpha, access to economic opportunities through compliance with the hiring and contracting requirements described in subsections Charlie and Delta of Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, which is 12 U.S.C. 1701 uniform. Bravo, the impacts, if any, those residents have experienced to their individual economic growth as measured by individual and household income. Charlie, the specific career skills acquired. Delta, the impacts, if any, those residents have experienced to their overall health. And Echo, the specific educational or technical certifications required, or acquired, not required, acquired. Okay. And 6, changes to the overall community health indicators in public housing developments and their surrounding neighborhoods, including asthma rates, air quality, water quality, and levels of lead and mold. Okay, subsection Hotel. Eligibility for the capital and operating funds. The receipt of a grant under this section shall not affect the eligibility of public housing agency or public housing dwelling unit to receive assistance under subsection Delta or Echo of Section 9 of the United States Housing Act of 1937, 42 U.S.C. 1437 Gulf. Subsection India funding. The out of funds of the Treasury not otherwise appropriated, there are appropriated to carry out of this section such sums as may be necessary for each of the fiscal years 2020 through 2030. Okay, let's see how much we got. Okay, so it's worth reading. Okay, Section 7, the Section 3 Program for Economic Opportunities. Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968, which is 12 U.S.C. 1701 uniform, is amended. In 1, in subsection Charlie 1, Alpha and Pirate. Okay, this is all amendments. Let's see. So Alpha in subsection paragraph, in subparagraph Alpha, by striking operating assistance provided pursuant to Section 9 of the Act, inserting. Okay, yeah. Okay, it talks about adding a hiring requirement for people. So let's see. So this part, adding this Paragraph Charlie, hiring requirement. The Secretary shall require that of the employment positions generated by development assistance provided pursuant to Section 6 of the United States Housing Act 1937, which is 42 U.S.C. 1437 Charlie. Assistance from the operating fund under Section 9 Echo of that Act 42 U.S.C. 1437 Golf Echo. Assistance from the capital fund under Section 9 Delta of that Act 42 U.S.C. 1437 Golf Delta. And assistance provided under a grant awarded under Section 6 of the Green New Deal for Public Housing Act. Public and Indian housing agencies and their contractors and subcontractors shall fill to the greatest extent possible 1. Not less than 40% of those positions generated during the 1-year period beginning 1 year after the initial receipt of grant funds awarded with low and very low income persons. 2. Not less than 50% of those positions. So it's basically saying to try to give the jobs to low income people. I'll spare you the rest because an hour and 15 minutes and I gotta get ready to leave soon. So in subsection Delta 1, blah blah blah. Let's see. Adding the following contracting requirement: the Secretary shall require that of the aggregate. Hold on, I'll just browse through this one. Okay, so it's saying that most of the money should go to resident-owned, public housing resident-owned businesses. That's what that part is. And if you want to read this for yourself, again, it's HR 5185. Hopefully you punched up and have been reading along. Let's see, the term describing public monitoring, measuring, inserting a section about reporting how much money's been used for different positions and who it went to. Termination of the Spears system. Workforce rosters. Secretary shall require each public housing agency to establish and maintain a roster of residents and public housing resident-owned businesses of the public housing agency in order to identify and spotlight talented local laborers and facility compliance with this section. Okay, a roster of residents. That seems kind of... I mean, I can understand why. I mean, again, it's on that borderline of... I mean, on its face, it's like, hey, keep the work that... Well, I mean, I guess it shouldn't be so hesitant about that part because the whole point is to provide jobs to low-income workers. So why not have a roster of them available? So I can support that. Yeah. Okay. Section 8, Family Self-Sufficiency Program. Section 23, United States Housing Act of 1937. By adding, so it's putting in Indian tribe, blah 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 blah. It's putting in stuff to consider for this bill into this other act. So I guess not a whole lot. So just putting in stuff that's related to this act and the other legislation, and then Section 9 is resident councils, which does the same thing for the United States Housing Act of 1937. It's putting in stuff to incorporate this act, which, yes, probably noteworthy to read, but you're probably bored to tears or very interested and probably about to start reading it yourself. I am going to leave it there because I went through the meat of this, and from what I've read so far, there's a lot of things I can get behind. Some things I have to vehemently be against for reasons that I have stated. So ultimately, as much as I want to say yes, the certain things in there with the grid-controlled appliance, grid-controlled appliances, yeah, like thermostat and so forth. That causes a severe cause of concern. I would not be in favor of this legislation strictly for that stuff. And like I've said, it's in the Green New Deal as well, and that is like the one thing that makes this a no. It's like, yeah, all this other stuff is. It's like saying, hey, we're going to cure cancer and end world hunger and make sure everybody lives together, or lives forever. Sorry, not together. Make sure everybody lives forever. But we're gonna shoot babies. So you're gonna vote yes because you have all these other things, and then shoot all the babies. You know, that's the problem when you have with legislation sometimes, and that's why people want to say, "Oh, we vetoed it because it had this legislation in it," and so forth. But you know, something like that is a very pertinent concern, and I would not be for it. I'm not for this piece of legislation because of that. So, yeah. But that is the reading of that bill and my thoughts on it. Once again, H.R. 5185, the Green New Deal for Public Housing. The Green New Deal for Public Housing Act. It was a long and fun time had by all. And once again, my name is Charles Kovach. I am running for the presidency of the United States. In case you didn't remember, in order to make this country a more direct democracy, and if a more direct democracy is something that interests you, then I urge you to spread the word about this campaign and at least this concept. And I thank you for your time.